Wow. I'm both excited and surprised to be invited here today. I was introduced to TED through my little brother about 10 years ago. And at this time, we had dial-up internet, and we weren't able to stream the talks online. He had gotten tickets to see TEDx Colorado, but when I had tried to get a ticket, there was none available. So what I did was I photocopied his name tag and attended my first TED event with a counterfeit badge. It's crazy that nobody's actually caught on yet, and I'm still here. Anyway, I'm here today as a National Geographic Young Explorer. When people think about exploration, they think about beautiful views and exotic experiences. I do myself. In reality, exploration is more so being in the back of cramped buses for hours on end, sitting out in the cold waiting for something to happen, or being sleep deprived just trying to get from point A to point B. There's been at least one moment in all of my adventures when I had to stop and truly ask myself, is this worth it? Today I want to dig into that question and make a case for exploration. To begin, I want to rewind to September of 2014. For 2 weeks, I had been trekking overland from Kathmandu, trying to get to Everest Base Camp. This particular morning, I'd be covering some of the toughest terrain on my trip, so I started early in the freezing cold. The first challenge that I faced was Zumpa Glacier. It's not that this was necessarily a highly technical glacier, it's just that I had never crossed a glacier before. As I started through it, I was crossing my way across blue glacial ponds and trying to find my footing on the ice and not slip. And as the morning wore on, it slowly warmed up. But so did the glacier. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by the sound of rocks sliding into these ponds, and the glacier itself started deteriorating right beneath my feet. At times, I would come across portions of the trail that were completely gone, just melted away, and I had to turn around and find another way through. But I pushed on, and eventually, I did find my way through. But now what lay ahead of me was Chola Pass. Chola Pass sits at 17,700 feet above sea level. This would be the highest elevation I had ever been to. To make things worse, when I looked up at where the trail should be, I realized there had been a rock slide, and the trail was completely covered in bowling ball-sized boulders. But when I looked behind me, I just saw the glacier, and I didn't want to turn around to do that again, so I decided to press on. What ensued over the next few hours could have been a spectator sport. I would walk up 5 feet or so, and then try to catch my breath, and I'd slide back down 3 or 4. But I kept pushing on through the boulder field and up the gully. Soon, the clouds rolled in and fog rolled in all around, so I couldn't even see in front of me. As I pushed up further, it started to snow. But I pushed on, and eventually I found my way to the top of Chola Pass. As always, I sat here trying to catch my breath, and looking forward, I saw what would become the second glacier I had ever crossed. But this time, I was cold, alone, and didn't know where to go, and I couldn't even see in front of me because of the fog and the snowstorm. I distinctly remember asking that question, is it worth it? Over the next few hours, I wound my way through the crevasses, tried not to slip and fall, and got lost among the seracs. But shortly before nightfall, I finally found the trail. I made it out. This experience, in many ways, has defined what I think of when I say exploration. It's a time when I tangibly took a step into the unknown, faced insurmountable obstacles, but made it through. Before we go further, I want to define with you what I see to be the building blocks of exploration. First off, exploration itself is defined in its most abstract sense as existence in the unknown. What comes before exploration and is often overlooked is a question. Questions that require exploration are those that seem like they might have no answer, but you try to answer them anyway. And when you choose to try to answer these questions is when you become an explorer. When you choose to explore, what often ensues is adventure. And as I discussed in my story earlier, exploring can be very exciting. Now, I also want to touch on some counterpoints to exploration. First off, people say that exploration is uncomfortable and that adventure is dangerous. And this leads them to the conclusion that questioning in and of itself is inefficient, and it's better to actually learn answers to the questions we already know. But here's the thing. When you assume this perspective, you're constructing a world around you that's completely static, unchanging. You're also eliminating your ability to question. Now, today, this world we live in is incredibly dynamic. With climate change, technology spreading, and with population increasing drastically, we've never seen the world changing this fast. As explorers, we can proactively take ownership of these changes, and even if we don't know where we're going or what our role will be when we get there, we can take ownership of this and seize the opportunity to step into the unknown. Coming back from Nepal, I knew I had learned something really important, but I wanted to apply it to more than just trekking through the mountains. Funded by a National Geographic grant, my brother and I came up with the idea to travel across the United States and try to inspire the next generation of explorers to conserve and protect our environment. With the grant money, we converted an old van to run on waste vegetable oil, and then changed the inside and covered the outside, turning it into our very own ice cream truck. We traveled around the United States for 3 months, and for 3,000 or 4,000 miles, we actually met with kids in their own neighborhoods and cities, asked them to choose an area that they wanted to conserve, and take ownership of that area as an explorer, somebody who, no matter the unknown things that would happen, would conserve and protect that area. The interesting thing about this experience is that we set out to inspire the next generation, but it was actually turned right back on us. We were the ones inspired by the creativity they showed in protecting and conserving our environment. Now let's fast forward to just last spring. Funded by another National Geographic grant, my team and I traveled to Ladakh. Now, Ladakh is a region high in the Indian Himalayas, nestled between Pakistan and Tibet. It's home to some of the world's highest altitude roads. But every single year, these roads are destroyed by the avalanches, rock slides, and flooding. And this essentially cuts Ladakh off from the outside world. Now, every spring, immigrants come to Ladakh to reconstruct these roads, despite of the extreme altitude. While we were in Ladakh, the story that unfolded was very much a coming-of-age story. We had found a Tibetan Buddhist culture with its identity rooted in its isolation at an awkward point in development, a time when things had grown a little bit too fast, but not quite fast enough. We found that the connectivity had increased tourism and sparked socioeconomic change, but the lack of connectivity for 6 to 9 months out of the year had prevented people from fully assuming this new way of life. We found that the roads themselves acted as the metronome of Ladakh's development. As this metronome quickens, Ladakh's isolation will become a thing of the past. They will be forced into the unknown to take that step. What I learned from this experience was that exploration is not always a choice. The reality of our world, even if you've constructed it to be static, is that the world is changing. A changing world, whether you want it to or not, will shake things up, and you will be forced to step into the unknown. To say this another way, at some point or another, we will all be forced to be explorers or to ignore the changes happening around us. I encourage you to do like the Ladakhis and step into the unknown and embrace these challenges when they cross your path. One note I'd like to say, something I've learned, is that exploration applies to you regardless of what you're doing in life. I want us all to stand here today and imagine a world where instead of business people, scientists, engineers, students, engineers, and teachers, we're all explorers. Well, yeah, what would our world look like? What would our world look like if we taught children to be explorers instead of how to answer questions on tests correctly? What would business look like if we tried to look for those answers or those questions and those answers to questions that really mattered? And what would science look like if we looked for meaningful questions regardless of whether they were published in a reputable journal? If you're inspired by what you hear today, I want you to take away 3 things. The first is practice. Practice every single chance you get. If a question comes across that will lead you into the unknown, chase that answer. As we practice exploration, we become better explorers ourselves. The second thing is be creative. Look for opportunities to explore. Like the ice cream expedition I talked about earlier, these types of things are only the tip of the iceberg. The opportunities for exploration are truly endless. The last thing I want us to do is encourage exploration. Like my story previously illustrated, exploration can at times be terrifying, and you may have no idea where you're going. And it's supposed to be this way. When you see somebody engaging in meaningful exploration, encourage them. Let's think back to that story in the Himalayas when I was alone in the cold, not sure where to go. I couldn't even see through the fog in the snowstorm. Remember that question I asked? Is this worth it? What I've learned since then is that explorers come across the raging river of the unknown, and instead of turning around, they jump in and learn how to swim. Next time something crosses your path that encourages you to step in the unknown, I implore you to boldly do so as an explorer. It's worth it.